Hello and welcome to Abide With Me, a conversation about living beyond loss. We are here today to talk about what it's like to live beyond situations of grief, of losing friendships, and even losing an educational experience during the pandemic. But first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Anu Omidei, and also the lovely people on this table around me. Choir members from the Lighthouse Choir. And so we start with Lauren Kavanagh, Nevin Tilley, and Chris Williams. And they'll be my companions all the way through, and we'll be hearing from different people about their experiences. We'll also be hearing from one or two experts who will help us along the journey, and we'll hear what they have to say. Just to make it clear from the beginning, this is a conversation. We don't propose to know it all, and we're not pretending to give you all the answers and solutions. We simply want to ensure that the conversation is had out loud in public. So I'd like to start off by sharing a situation that I experienced quite recently, where my cousin, who was not even 33 years of age, passed away really, really suddenly a couple of months ago, not even that. It's so recent, and just going through that was such a difficult experience, particularly because it was so sudden and it was so unexpected, and he was fine health-wise and fine in every respect. But one day he was here and the next day he wasn't. And just having to deal with that and walk through that situation with, close family, friends, and anyone who was involved was really something. And that was part of the impetus for wanting to have this conversation, because there are such a number of complex emotions that we experience, and it can be so difficult to marshal them. And I think one of the things that's just so tricky is that you're passing through this and the rest of the world is just spinning and the rest of the world is just going on, and it feels quite lethal. So that's just as an introduction to this. But I'm going to invite somebody who is going to speak with us about her experiences of loss during the pandemic. And so welcome Ovie, who is also one of our choir members. So welcome Ovie to the table. As you guys here know, Ovie is one of our soprano singers at the Lighthouse Choir. But of course, we've asked you to come and join us in this conversation because you've experienced some loss recently. So would you like to tell us about what happened?
So it was just before the pandemic, actually. It started in the beginning of 2018. We lost my mum. So it was pretty sudden. I just remember getting off from work on the 21st of December and call from family, and I took her into hospital. And she passed away in the January. That was pretty hard for our family. So there was, there's three of us. So there's my older sister, I'm the middle child, peacemaker, and our younger brother. So that was a hard thing going through. Especially for my brother's got two little boys, and they were like 6 and 2 at the time. So as a family, we stuck together and got through that. It was quite distressing. It was, even though I'm come from the church family, but like we said, loss is still loss, and you still grieve. Yeah. And you've learned, and this church is really good, you're still going to go through the grieving process. So we were just navigating through that. And then my sister, the three of us were always close. Our parents brought us up really close, the three of us, but me and my sister we're just like partners in crime. There's only 11 months between us. And she was my fiercest defender. We had each other's back, and we always had a motto, even though we're Christians: if you go for one of us, you go for all of us, and it's war. So that was our motto as siblings. So we were really close. And my sister was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and the doctors always said she couldn't do this, but she always beat the odds. She's going to be in a wheelchair. She wasn't. She went to uni. She got a degree. She got a master's in Hull, and she was a journalist. She used to work for Granada, editing the political show of the Sundays. She was amazing, and the rheumatoid didn't get her down. And she was my hero. She could do everything, and she had bouts where she was ill. You know, you'd look my sister at the wrong way and she'd get infections, but she'd fend everything off. But I think she started getting ill. She was 47 when she passed away, my sister. When was it? It was in November. Took her into hospital again. They found out she had an enlarged heart and it was part of her rheumatoid. And the left side of her heart was stiff, and that was due to her rheumatoid arthritis. So it didn't affect her. She'd done everything. She worked with the homeless in Whitechapel. She was always there to give people lifts. I used to call her peg leg, because if you looked at her, you wouldn't think there was anything wrong with it till she walked. She always struggled walking. And she always drove a car like she just robbed a bank, and she just abandoned it. And she was so notorious in church, the way she just parked the car like she just done a heist, and she just left the car and ran. So we, you know, our siblings, and you're really close, we communicated really well. She didn't have to cough, and I knew it was my sister, and she wanted me to, and we could communicate really well. So she went into hospital. She, because with the misdiagnosis, with the loads of medication they give her, she's had loads of attaining problems, but she battled everything. And she came out of hospital and she came to mine to recuperate, because she was still in the house with my mum, even though my mum passed. So I said, no, come to mine. I said, you're getting better, you're coming out of hospital. She was arranging everything, because she just passed the second master's degree, and she was about to go for the ceremony in the big cathedral. So she was with mine, and it was like a Thursday night, so we were just talking, because it was nearing Christmas, so we were just talking, and we were bouncing things off for Christmas. And I went down, she wanted something to eat, and I was just tidying because the alarm man was coming. And then I came upstairs to give her food, and she was just sitting up in bed.
It's okay. It's all right, that's why we're here. You know, take your time.
And I thought she was asleep.
Oh.
So she didn't wake up.
So sorry for your loss.
So that was the 19th of November, 2019. And we had the service in Christchurch on the 16th of December.
So sorry.
Yeah, do you know what, like the minute, I mean, I've got a younger sister, and I was like, right, but the minute she said sister, and I could, like, if there's, you know, you don't want to lose anyone in your life, but if there's one person in the world I would never ever want to lose, it's your sister. Like, and then to go from that, and then have to go through the pandemic as well, it was like within the next couple of months, I just can't.
Actually, Lauren, I think I hid. I shut down with my sister, because with my mum I didn't talk, and then with my sister I just shut down. So for me, with the pandemic, I work in the NHS as a specialist, lower limb wounds, so I just hid with my brother for a year. So in a way, I don't know, I think I just hid and just done everything, so I could just block it out. So to me, it just went in a blur.
Yeah. And what does that look like? You know, when you're saying you just hid, what does that look like in day-to-day life?
To me, because I'm not afraid of silence or being on my own anyway. So because he couldn't go anywhere, and even just to protect my family with the pandemic, I just hid. To me, it was fine. I would go into work with the team. You know, through the NHS, we've known this. You know, we had the threat a couple of years about swine flu coming, and we had masks and stuff, and nothing come about it. So we always had these meetings. So when it came, and it's, you know, this is, you know, it's so apt today, because this is, you know, was it 2 years today on the reflection of the pandemic. And when he put everybody in lockdown, to me that was fine. I didn't have to talk to anybody. Yeah. In my nature of my job, I work autonomously, so I can sort my own day out to go and see patients, so I could just hide. So, but then a choir.
So tell us about how choir affected you. Because
I think
one of the things for me was that I until you shared your story, I never would have guessed. No, I know we were on Zoom, but you know, I still felt that you were very present, and you were physically present every week.
Yeah.
So tell us about.
That's easy. You can block it out. I didn't have to deal with it.
Right.
So I had loved ones. They always trying to get in touch with me to talk, and because you know, Joy knows and people know how close me and my sister were, and I just found it easy just to block it out. So I couldn't go, like I said, I couldn't go there because I didn't think I would come back, because just how close we were as a family, and to have it, you know, and especially for my little nephew, who's in about 5 or 6, my mum and my sister used to take him everywhere. And the little one needed counselling because he said it hurted so hard in his heart. He just wanted to put a knife through his heart.
Wow.
So
It's really, really difficult to explain to children.
It is. And to have it, and just to see his face when he saw me that morning and my brothers, he knew his Auntie E had gone. So you have all of that. So with me, the pandemic, I could just hide, and it was a good way, but
you can't hide, can you?
No, you
That's
can't.
You've got to
the
face
problem
it.
is,
You
however
can't.
well you think you're hiding,
You really can't.
things
can't.
just pop up. And to me, one of the worst things of bereavement generally is just that you're just doing something that you think is perfectly normal, and then you think something happens, and you think, oh, I must tell, and that you can't.
You can't.
It's like a wave, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So,
And however much you think you're hiding,
you know.
so things just happen, and
Like
it's all just part of the process, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the very hiding and then surrounding yourself with people. I think it's all part of the healing process, if you like.
And I don't suppose there's any right or wrong way to go through it, which is a good point at which to introduce. We have a couple of people with us who have had to deal with people who have been through these situations for many, many years between them. I think for 4 decades I counted between them. So can I welcome Lee-Anne Widnall, who's a psychotherapist, and she deals a lot with grief counselling and now lectures within it, and Vicar, David, Gavin to the table. Welcome and thank you for joining us, Lee-Anne and David. So Ovie was telling us that she felt like she hid for quite some time. And Lee-Anne, in your experience, what do you have to say about that? Is that a common reaction, an uncommon reaction?
Yeah, I think there's something about how our society is made up now, because that's 2 things that came across for me when people were talking, that grief is grief, we will experience it. We know it happens, it's part of the cycle of life. And yet, when it comes to us as individuals, we hide our tears and we apologise for our tears. We hide our grief and we hide our sadness. And I suppose if we were able to show our grief, experience our grief together, there may not be a role for psychotherapists. Why do people need to come to psychotherapists? Because they can't find a way of sharing that universal experience with people in their life. They feel that they need to hide it for some reason.
And what's your view on whether it's better to share or it's better to hide? Is there a view? Is there any sort of right or wrong? How might it affect us or not?
Well, I think somebody said it's sort of individual, isn't it, our experience? And that's one of the difficulties. Our society is so complex now, and we've got lots of different ways of being in the world, multiple ways of being in the world. So everybody's experience is individual. That said, that I think sharing, being with others, communicating the common experience, being able to cry together, being able to grieve together, which was something that was denied us during lockdown, is essential.
Yeah. I think that's when you say like sharing, what immediately came to me is obviously the massive use of social media and stuff as well. because I've had friends who've lost someone, and maybe not straight away, but it's like they put a post on like in memoriam, they let people know, and then other friends have just kind of sent us a message and be like, this has happened, I'm okay, or like just don't tell anyone, or so it is quite, it was such an isolated world in the pandemic, but we still had the wide web connecting people, but then other people would still choose to isolate themselves.
Yeah, I don't think everyone can communicate in that way.
Yeah.
And I think also I experienced loss in the pandemic, and I think for me there was something just about being with people. So if you put something on social media, it's a deliberate act, and you're rather than a coming together. I don't really understand that entirely, but it felt like there was a piece missing for me. I don't know about other people, just about physically being with people.
Yeah, I'd rather have people around me rather than it spread out over the world.
Also socials, it's just spreading it out to the wider public. Yeah. Whereas in this situation, I think the people closest to us are really the people that can help us heal.
Yeah,
the most.
Absolutely.
And David, you.
I think in lockdown it's been so much harder. That was coming out in Ovies Story in different ways, because a lot of the mechanisms that we would normally use to help us, company and hugs and things like that, were denied to us. Been involved in situations where I've visited someone who was dying in hospital because the daughter couldn't, because she had COVID, or because otherwise they weren't allowed in. And you miss out on things. Funeral services, so many people couldn't go to a funeral service of someone they were close to, and nobody likes a funeral service, but they actually help us. There are things that in that, like Ovie was wanting to celebrate in some ways, in what you were saying, your sister, and tell us the good things that about her. And that's part of what you do in a public way, in a Thanksgiving service, in the funeral service. And to miss out on bits of that, the kind of robbery that death feels like, it feels like a double robbery through this time in some ways.
Yeah, and how were you able to, and it must have been so hard for you, having to be that peace in between families and their loved ones that have passed away. But as we're about to wrap this up, how were you able to, or how did you try to be that kind of connecting piece, and how might we be able to stand in the gap a little in the way that you must have done during that period of time?
There's probably a particular way that I would look to do it with a dog collar on, and others might do from the perspective of Christian faith, where actually in some way you're not really there as someone who knows or is looking to provide the help, but to say that I know someone who knows, and I know someone who can give the help, and making the connections between people and encouraging them to make that connection and have that conversation with God, and find someone who can really give a bit of help. So.
And how would you, from your perspective, encourage people, everyday people, to be there for each other, or be able to be that person who can provide that comfort in the short term, when people might want to hide, or when people might not want to share? Any words for us as to how we might be able to go about helping our friends and family that we know?
Yeah, well, just as you were speaking, I was thinking that's one of the things that I was doing during lockdown, was working with people on how they created those memorials, those remembrances, those rituals of coming together to celebrate and remember. How do you do that in lockdown? It's not perfect, but finding ways to make sure that this loss is marked and the memory is held. And so I guess I would say the same thing now is whether you're, because lots of people don't have a church, do they? Or a belief. So how do you do that in the absence of a church community? Or I do believe you do need to mark it in some way, and finding ways as a family and friends, how do you come together to share the memories, mark the memories, celebrate the life, and adapt to living with the memory rather than the physical being.
I think it's essential to break the ice with all friends, family, contacts. You feel very alone and isolated, and it's a question of getting over that reconnection with everybody, just starting the conversation and getting some sort of
it's key, isn't it? Because
connection again.
A lot of people say, I don't want to upset them, but they're already, already upset.
Yes.
and talking about the upset is a relief, and is a being met, and an understanding that this is part of life. So you're telling your story. Hopefully you're feeling listened to and heard, and you're having your memory witnessed, and that life witnessed as well.
And I think as I bring it to a close, it's a wonderful conversation. I think feeling that you are being heard and that you're being listened to, for me personally, was such a big thing, as opposed to, in some cultures there is a desire to sort of come and comfort and want them to be okay, because the person listening themselves feels distressed that their loved one is distressed. But actually just being heard and just being present and just being listened to can be so powerful, as can, going through the things and sharing and marking it in some way, as you've described. And actually that's why we came to have these conversations, because the song that we're releasing, Abide With Me, is a song that's well used in marking situations where people pass away. Thank you so much for being here. We will continue this conversation, and we hope that you will look and watch and listen to us as we discuss other situations of loss in further episodes. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you again.